Welcome back to the IU427 garage, everybody. Today we are going to jump into the wiring harness, both for the engine and the chassis on our Type 65 Coupe. Where we left off in the last video, I was working on getting the power feed wire, so the B plus is what they designate it as, from the alternator over to the starter post. And the one that comes with the Ron Francis harness is probably just fine for 90% of the builds out there. For our build, it was going to be a little bit small because this alternator is a little bit larger in what its output is in comparison to a stock alternator. So this one at full charge, meaning when the engine's in the upper RPM range, is putting out about 180 to 185 amps. So we need a wire that's going to support that, because we don't want to have a wire that's too small for the amps that both the alternator is outputting and two, that our system is drawing. So we want to make sure it's good on both sides of that. So we took out what is essentially a number 8 wire that feeds from the alternator around the back of the engine and then over to the starter post. And we've changed that out to a 4-gauge wire. So if you look down here, I've already got it temporarily landed. The bolt isn't tight, but it's landed right there on our alternator, and you can see that I made it look just like the Ron Francis harness ends look. And the only difference is that we went ahead and we took the brown wire, which is the excite wire, from the ignition switch, and we've just safed it off inside of that corrugated tube. If the owner ever finds a need to use a stock alternator, which I seriously doubt, it'll be there. It's just not worth the extra effort to pull it out of the harness, even though I had this harness completely apart. So what I did is I took the split loom off of the harness from basically the point at which it goes through the tunnel here. So just on the other side of the tunnel, right here, it splits into two. And it goes to the starter and it goes to the alternator. And that is just a loop for the alternator wire from one to the other. It just loops through those two pieces of split loom. The rest of the wires that feed the fuse box go down and follow that alternator wire to the starter. And those, I think, are 10-gauge wire. They could be 8, but I'm pretty sure that they're 10. And those feed both the switch circuits and the always hot circuits on the fuse panel. And there's one more wire that's inside of that split loom, and that is the start request wire. So there's a blue wire that comes from our ignition switch and goes straight down. Actually, it doesn't go straight down. It actually goes through a relay. But it goes straight down to the starter from that harness that we've got in there. So basically what happens is there's a wire from the starter switch that goes through a relay. From that relay, it goes down to the starter motor, and that is the smaller terminal on the starter that actually turns the solenoid on in order for it to actually start the engine. So that's in that harness as well. The other wires that we got up through the tunnel, and I'm going to go around to the other side of the car to show you this because it's just easier, is our rear harness. So I worked on getting the rear harness all strapped in the tunnel here. You can see I've got a strap right here, and I've got a strap up there, and then I've actually got another strap right along this tube right here, right underneath where that tunnel cover is. And I've just got the tunnel cover kind of in place right now with a couple of clecos. So I got a cleco right up here, and I've got one down here, and I got one on the other side in about the same spot. And then I brought our rear harness up through the tunnel piece, and I've got those 3 connectors that we talked about previously. These are the 2 connectors that come on the rear harness as it's delivered, and these are the 3 wires that we added for our reverse solenoid and our reverse light switch. So those are in the other 3-pin connector that we have there. What I'm working on now is figuring out where I'm going to take this harness. So this harness right here is the harness that feeds the Holley system. And you can see there's an inline fuse right there. There's a couple of connectors on here that tie into the Holley system. And then on this end is where we're going to tie into the battery. And then there's a couple of shrink tubing deals here that I've got to heat shrink on, and then it should be done. Now I may have to shorten this cable so it's the proper length to reach our battery and not look messy. So we'll see about that. And then I've got a couple of the other harnesses over here on the driver's side that I'm working on. This one in particular is for our gauges. So I'm going to feed this one out through this same grommet right here that we're sending out to the engine. I'm going to make a little room in that grommet. I'm going to send this other harness through there because it actually has a relatively small piece of split loom that goes on it. So it's this stuff right here. And this is going to feed our gauges. So we have a oil pressure sensor that we have to tie to, and it's a 3-wire, so I'm going to tell you how we're going to do that. And then we have our coolant temperature sensor, which is a 2-wire. So the coolant temperature sensor is actually pretty easy. We're going to cut off the factory end that Speed Hut gave us, and we're going to tie on to here where it says water, and we're going to take one of the grounds and we're going to tie that to the Speed Hut connector, and it's going to snap right into our gauge. What we're going to do on the oil pressure sensor is we're actually going to take both the oil temperature sensor wire and the oil pressure sensor wire, and we're going to use these 3 wires, since it's a 3-wire sensor, and we're going to use these because we do not have an oil temperature gauge for our Speed Hut gauge package. I went onto the Factory 5 website, and I'm going to verify this upstairs with the gauges that we have. But for the coupe, there's no clock, and there is no oil temperature gauge. So our 4 gauges are the speedo, the tach, water temperature, oil pressure, our voltmeter, and our fuel level sensor. The voltmeter is taken care of all at the dash. The fuel level sensor wire comes in from the back of the car, and that's a wire over in one of those connectors that we were just talking about that go in the rear harness. And so since I don't need the oil temperature wire for our gauge package, I'm going to use that wire for the 3rd wire of our sensor for our oil pressure. And then I've got 2 extra wires that are in this harness. One is for the thermal wire, so basically the wire that would turn the fan on. And then I've got a choke wire, which we don't need, but I can use that tan circuit because if you remember, I need a circuit for our reverse lockout solenoid, and so I might end up using this electric choke circuit for that to power it because it's a key on circuit. So that'll work out perfect. These two wires will not go through the firewall. So basically I'm going to relume this with the split loom from about here down. That split loom will go back on this harness, go out to the engine bay. However, I do need a signal wire for our tachometer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that green wire that's marked thermo. I'm going to actually use it to feed to one of the positive sides of a coil. So if you can see in our case, there is a red wire at every coil. There's a red wire there, there's a red wire there, a red wire there, and a red wire there. And so that's our common. So basically that feeds power to our coil. And so in each case, the colored wire is going to be our ground for the coils. And that's what activates them. So what we're going to do right here is we're going to splice into this pink wire. This is for cylinder number 8. We're going to take that green wire that comes out of that engine harness for the gauges, and we're going to splice into here, and on the other end of this connector where this ties into the dash harness, I'll cut the green wire, and then inside this bundle of wires there's a purple tack wire which is right here, and I'm going to tie that into the green wire of this harness so that it gives us a tack signal for our gauge. And I hope all that made sense. I'll show you it when it's kind of done so you can see the path that everything is taking. But right now I'm working on that harness, getting it ready to send through the front of the tunnel and into the engine bay so I can get that part out into the engine bay. My goal for this week, and it's rather ambitious, is to get everything through that upper tunnel piece and then have it basically ready to wire. I want to get the entire engine wired. So I want to get all of the ground wires, I want to get all of the B positive for the battery, from the battery to the starter, and all that stuff for the alternator we discussed. I have to make a ground wire for our alternator because it requires, according to the manufacturer, a separate ground of the same size from the alternator ground terminal to the engine block. And so I want to take care of that too. So I want to get all that stuff through the firewall in this video so that hopefully in the next video I can wire the entire engine bay and be done with at least the engine bay portion, and then start working on the wiring inside of the cockpit. Now don't forget, I've still got all of the cooling hoses to finish up. So I started on those, but I was stymied because we ran into the issue with the alternator. So at some point I'm going to have to jump back onto that and get the majority of our cooling hoses taken care of as well. Our music update is Aerosmith, Living on the Edge. I moved some things around. I initially had the harness for the rear of the car going through a different grommet, so I've moved it. Basically, I had this harness right here through this grommet right here, and thinking to myself, I should probably keep the Holley ECU wires next to one another. I went ahead and I moved that rear harness to the left. I put some of the Holley harness through here. So basically this is all of the VVT stuff. So the variable valve timing stuff all goes through this harness here. And right now I've just got it laying on the engine because I haven't looked to see which side is bank 1 or bank 2. And so I've got to figure that out, and then these will all plug in. But basically it's all of this kind of stuff for the cam sensors. So I've got 2 of them here. Like I said, I don't know if this goes on the other side or this side. They need to plug into here and here. And then there's some other wires that are going to plug in like in the back. But so I've got those through. I ended up drilling another hole. My goal here was to be able to get these huge connectors. I mean, some of these connectors in this Holley harness are pretty big. Where are they? Right here. So right here, we've got the connector for the coils. and we've got the connector for all of the injectors. And these connectors are 1.75 inches from this corner to this corner. So you have to have a hole 1.75 inches large to fit them through. Our grommets actually don't need to be that big. Our grommet that goes around, it's going to be right here. So it's just past where the O2 sensor goes through. We're going to have our grommet back here. Our grommet only has to be the same inside dimension as the grommets that we have. These are the grommets we got from Ron Francis. But that grommet won't fit over those connectors either. So what I did is I've actually got a 2-inch hole behind here. I'm going to pull this up, kind of set it up in place right here. So I've got a 2-inch hole behind here, and then I've made this split panel. So I made the 1.25 inch hole in the center. I made all my rivet holes, and then I split this panel. I just took it to the shear and I cut it in half. So both the panel and the grommet are split. So you can see I've got this grommet split on one side. So what I can do is I can take this grommet and wrap it around the harness. I can pull these two small panels out, get all those connectors through here, and then put the panels back in and push the grommet in. And this allows it to be nice and clean and use a 2-inch hole behind, but only an 1.25 inch hole here. I think it's going to seal out the weather and everything really good. And I've already gotten this question on Facebook, I think it was. I think I posted on both Instagram and Facebook, but I got a comment on Facebook, and it's an honest question. I was asked, why didn't you just depin the connectors? And I could have done that. The problem lies in the way that Holley wraps these harnesses. And I saw it on this other harness as I was feeding it through, and it barely made it through that 1.25 inch hole, because this is the way Holley is wrapping these transitions. They don't wrap these and then fold everything over nice and neat so this doesn't have this big bulk. They make them stick out like arms straight out the side. And I would have had to unwrap the entire harness, and I think about 3 locations when I looked at this harness. So there's a couple different places along the harness that it's that way, and one of them being right where those connectors are. And so I thought to myself, there's got to be an easier way to do this. And rather than just jumping in and starting to pull shit apart, I gave myself an evening to think about it. And usually in the evenings is when I return emails and all that kind of stuff while I sit in my comfy chair. And that exercise that I do each night by going online and doing that, I think it helps me to kind of decompress, and I'm able to solve a lot of these problems that I see in the build process. And what I do is I immediately text myself because I'm getting to that age where if I don't write a note or text myself immediately, so as a reminder, by the time morning rolls around, I forgot everything that I thought of. So I text myself last night, and then when I got out to the shop today, I made that piece up and I split that grommet, and it's going to work out really well. And it was by far way less work. So right now what I'm doing is I've got the other harness prepped to get it through the firewall or through the top of the tunnel, the forward tunnel panel. And then I should be pretty much done with getting everything through there today. I think the only other harness that has to go through there is the Holley power harness. And that one I showed you earlier in the video. It's just got 2 wires. And I think I'm gonna send that one through that same grommet that I have this harness through right here. So it should fit through there with that other. If not, I can probably fit it through over here where I've got that rear harness. But I'm trying to keep all the Holley stuff together and then all the chassis stuff over there. And just to keep everything a little bit more organized. I still haven't figured out where I'm gonna mount the Holley ECU. because we've got all of our AC ducting that has to work its way through, and I'm trying to figure out a way that we can do some dampers for our AC so that we don't have to send cooled air to the windshield in the summer, and we don't necessarily have to send warm air to the foot boxes in the wintertime if all you want to do is defrost the window. So I'm trying to find some dampers, either mechanical or electric, that I can put in line to split those AC hoses up to when we do that. But I haven't seen our dash yet either. Now, this is the dash that came with the car, and you can see it, we've got the eyebrow here as well. That is not going to go in the car. The owner has ordered a carbon fiber dash for the car, and of course when he ordered it, they told him that it would be a week. He'd have it in a week. But then he ordered it, and suddenly it was 5 weeks out. So we're waiting on that. It's not a big deal. I'm not ready to jump into that stuff right now anyways, but I'd really like to have the dash here because it has a glove box, so I can figure out where to mount the AC stuff, and also where the ECU is going to mount, because it's got, there's a lot of stuff in here, and we've got wipers too. And I haven't decided how the wiper motor is going to mount, because it's not the factory 5 wiper motor. It's is it AAC or ACC? Another company makes this universal wiper kit that the owner ordered, and I've got to figure out a way to make that fit in here too. So space is going to become an issue. All that real estate behind the dash, I think, is going to quickly get filled, and so I want to make sure that I put the stuff that, one, needs to be accessible in areas that it can remain accessible, like the ECU, and then those things that won't need to be gotten to very often, meaning the air conditioning hoses and stuff like that, can be put in areas where it's tucked away and out of our way, so that I can get all that stuff fit behind the dash. But I think that's where I'm going to leave it for today. I'll catch up with you guys tomorrow. I'm hoping that I'm going to have that other harness through the top of the tunnel, maybe even that power harness, and I'll catch up with you tomorrow. We'll see, how far I got. It is the next day, everybody, and I got a lot of stuff done last evening. I managed to get all of the wires, all the harnesses, through that upper tunnel piece, and I got them into the engine bay. And I got as many of the connectors plugged in as I could. So here's all the wires, all the harnesses, going through the upper tunnel piece, because it's technically not a firewall. This would be a firewall. That down there would be a firewall. The way I did the grommet and these reducer pieces came out great. What I did do is I wrapped that section of the harness in harness tape. And the reason I did that is because, for whatever reason, in that section of the Holley harness, that spiral loom that they have around it just wanted to keep like bunching up, and it didn't want to lay all nice and neat. So if you don't know what harness tape is, it's this right here. A lot of times they'll call it liner tape too, but what it is it's like electrical tape that doesn't have any adhesive. And so how you get it to stick initially is you wrap really tight around whatever you're wrapping, and just the friction of that will allow you to wrap around the harness and keep everything like together and neat. And then at the end, I use Scotch 33 Plus, and lately I've gone to buying this on eBay in packs of 10 because it's cheaper than I can get it here locally, even from my wholesale house. So Scotch 33 Plus is good for all of those areas that might be seen, and in those areas where you really want to make sure that whatever you're sticking it to stays stuck. I use more inexpensive electrical tape for stuff that's going to go inside split loom and stuff like that. I've even used the black tape from Harbor Freight, and it's actually not too bad. Scotch also has another more like economy black tape. It's called Temflex, and it works really good too. The problem with it is if it's exposed to any type of heat, the adhesive likes to let go. But there's your lecture on harness tape and electrical tape. So I got that through the upper tunnel piece yesterday, and I got as many connectors plugged in as I can. Ignore those wires for now. So the front cam phasers, I've got those plugged in. I've got the cam sensors on the back of each of the heads plugged in as well. Now remember, this is the Holley Dominator system, and so it works with the VVT system, the variable valve timing system that's built within the architecture of the Coyote engine. If you're not using the cam phasers, meaning you've locked out your phasers and you're doing straight timing, there would only be one sensor, and it would be the back #1 intake sensor, which is right here. And that is in a different harness from all of the other sensors that we've plugged in. All of the VVT stuff comes out to the engine in a separate harness. And so I've got all that stuff plugged in. I went to start plugging in some of the stuff here in the intake valley, and some stuff was too short, some stuff was too long, and so I'm going through the process of making these wires custom fit at this point. So I'm going to take this set of wires here, I'm going to shorten them probably about 14 inches, and I'm going to take this one and I'm going to shorten it about 10 inches. And what that's going to do is it's going to clean up what would have been either clutter in the valley of the intake or down here where we've already got a bunch of clutter from wires. It looks messy now, but I think the way I've routed everything, I'm going to be able to tie wrap stuff together so that it's going to look much neater. So have some patience with me on that. So this side of the engine's done, and then over here I've got the cam phasers and the sensors at the back plugged in as well. So this stuff is plugged in here, and then the cam sensors are here and right here. So it's kind of dark down there, you can't see that. And I'm going to route all this stuff up here underneath our custom covers. So the only thing wire-wise that's going to be exposed is this small section of wiring right here where they peek out the end of our covers. And I'm going to add some of this spiral loom that Holley gives you in the box to get that dressed out. And then it's kind of where I'm at today. I've got the map sensor harness / wires lengthened because they were about 8 inches short, and it's just because of the configuration that we have and how our wires are routed. So where is that? I thought I had it right here. Is it this one? No. That's the IAC. I'll find it. Oh, here it is. So that's this one here. So you can see I used the same color wires, so I used red, orange, and black to extend the wires. So there's a splice here and there's a splice down there. Same gauge wire. It'll get the spiral loom on it. It actually goes to a sensor that's right here. There's our map sensor right there. And then our intake air sensors there, and then our TPS is right here, and I'm probably going to shorten this wire as well because the other side of this connector is going to end up about here, and that's where I'm going to have that connector. So that's what I'm working on tonight. There's not much to show, but I did want to catch you up on all of that stuff there. Still have no idea where we're going to mount the computer, but it'll work out. I'm not too worried about it. The power for the Holley system is routed up here right now. It's plenty long. I'm probably going to cut about 4 feet of cable off of this to land it on the battery. But that's where I'm at tonight. I'll catch up with you guys tomorrow. Hopefully I'll have those wires shortened and the connectors in the position where they need. If I get everything loomed, they'll already be plugged in when I come back with the camera, and you guys will see that. So I'll catch up with you tomorrow. All right, next day, everybody. The harnesses got shortened. All 3 of the harnesses, two of the harnesses got shortened. One of them got extended. So the one for our map sensor got extended by about 10 inches, and it's here. I just haven't put any of the spiral loom on it because obviously I'm going to be short, so I needed a piece of the spiral loom that we pulled off of the other two sensor wires, and I'm going to use that here. I'm not sure if this is the way I'm going to keep it. I may end up shortening this line that goes to our throttle position sensor because it doesn't need to be this long. In some of the Borla instructions, it you know, like for the knock sensor and stuff, it says that, you know, you can basically just take these extra wires and put them in between the bottom of the intake and the top of the engine cover. I don't know. So I'm probably going to revisit that and make that shorter. But the IAC, so the AIC, got shortened, and it's right down in here. So it's right here where my finger is, and it tucks kind of neatly into the harness. Now you can see I've got quite a few wires that I need to pretty up back here, but I'm going to wait until I get all of these in place, and then I'll work on prettying them up. I tried to organize them so that they lay over one another in a manner in which I'm going to be able to tie wrap all this stuff in place and neaten it up. All the loom is black, so it should kind of blend in, but I'm going to do everything I can to make it as pretty as I can. I still got to reloom this one, and then I'm waiting on an answer for the sensor for the air intake temperature sensor, or the MAT is what they call it on the harness, because I'm reading conflicting information on that depending on where I look for the information, and I want to have the owner contact Borla, ask them where the best spot is to mount it, because the Holley Dominator instructions are saying that it must be used. Now, how they tune the engine without it is beyond me, because it wasn't in the system. And I left it as a question mark on the Borla instructions because there wasn't a spot for it. So again, I don't know how they tuned around it. It's just a simple box to check on the tuning software from what I read in the Holley Dominator or HP instructions, but we'll see. I want to find out exactly where to put it. Some things, some places are saying that you can just put it in ambient air, so basically make a holder for it and just mount it on the back of the firewall. Or others are saying, oh, it has to be mounted at the front of the car, but I'm afraid if I mount it at the front of the car, it's going to pick up all the heat from the radiator. So I don't know. Others are saying it has to be in the intake stream, which means we would have to basically drill a hole in one of these horns, and these horns do come off. So I had this one off earlier. So it just unscrews. You can see it's threaded. The back one here is a little bit tighter. I'd have to probably use a strap wrench to get it off. But whether or not we either drill and tap, or whether we drill and use a push-in sensor either here or down in here to hide it, I don't know. But the Holley instructions say that it must be used. So I'm assuming that it has to be used. Now we just have to find out from Borla where it should be placed and used, and then we'll move from there. Other than that, the engine's pretty much wired. All right, next day, you never realize how quickly time passes. And I looked down to see how many minutes the video was running, and it's gonna run long. So I'm gonna wrap it up here pretty quick. But I found something yesterday, and I've got to order parts for it. And again, it pisses me off because it went to the dyno with all these parts, and it came back, and I'm putting the harness in the car, and I'm missing a fuse, which I have. I can grab a fuse, and a fuse cap. Basically, it's a waterproof cover for this Holley VVT harness that goes to like the cam sensors and stuff. And so here it is right here. And it's upsetting to me that it went to the dyno with the fuse in place. So this had a fuse on it, and I'll show you the other one, and it also has the cap. And now the fuse is missing. I'll grab probably a 20 amp fuse, because that looks like about the size of the wire that would go in there. But over here on the main harness, there is one of these caps, and it has the waterproof cover right on it. I don't know if I can get this off with one hand. There it is. So this one has a 30 amp fuse in it. You can see these caps. They're made by Delphi. The connectors are made by Delphi as well. And I have some similar connectors here, but they're just different enough that it won't snap on. So I'm gonna have to order some Delphi weatherproof connectors, and you know, I'll probably hold on to the bottom part of the connector, because I don't know that I can just order the cap, and throw a fuse in that thing, and hopefully that will get us to the point where I'm not missing any parts as far as the Holley harness is concerned. But it's just a little upsetting that I know it went there with it, because the boxes were unopened. The harness was unopened when we sent it there. And I know that all that stuff was there. So we'll just deal with it and, you know, get another one. I think that's where we're going to end the video. I've done a bunch of stuff. I got a bunch of stuff done last night after I put the camera down. But you guys will see that in the next video. I've been on the phone with the car owner, and he's been on the horn with both Holley and with Borla, because we had some questions about some sensor placements. I think we've got those ironed out. We need to get some fittings ordered, because I'm having issues with the front fuel line where it's interfering with some of our coolant hoses. So we'll deal with that in the next video, but I want to thank you guys all for watching. If you're enjoying the content here, please do the like, the share, the subscribe, all that kind of stuff. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.